What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and we talked about it at the top of yesterday's video, but I feel like I haven't been negative enough this offseason. We've only done 2 formal do not draft videos, and we've only done wide receivers at this point. Today, August 5th, is our first do not draft running back style video. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get into 4 running backs you need to stop drafting as soon as possible in your 2022 fantasy football drafts. If you enjoyed the video at any point in time, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like, and as a great philosopher, Oprah Siverson, once said, let's get negative, let's go.
Thirsty, thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty bag.
So at the top here, we're going to talk about Nick Chubb, who is going off the board on Underdog at the 301 as the RB13. In my rankings, I have him as my 311 as the RB17. So he's a 2-3 turn pick on Underdog. I personally have him as a 3-4 turn pick. Now, I'm also going to put on these player cards my exposure on Underdog just so you guys can see, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm not drafting these guys that I'm telling you guys to fade. I'm not drafting these guys. 8.3%, 1 divided by 12. If you're on market with a player, you'll have about 8.3% of that player on your teams. I only have 2.6% of Nick Chubb. Now, of course, this exposure, this ADP, all comes from Underdog. If you want to hop on Underdog, go out there. They have great best ball drafts. They have a great tournament, Best Ball Mania 3. There's millions of dollars up top. We stream every Saturday. We're going to be adding streams on Monday as well. We're going to be streaming all offseason, drafting on Underdog. They have the puppy out right now. It's going to fill extremely soon. It is one of the cheapest entry points for thousands of dollars in prizes. So you put in $5 for a team. You go out there, you draft a team, and you have a shot at I think 50,000 or more in prizes. Now, when you use promo code RON, I have links in the description. I'll have links down below in the comments. You hit the link. It'll put the promo code in for you. You use promo code RON, and they will match your deposit up to $100. So you put in $10, they'll match 10. If you want to put in 25, they'll match 25. All of that good stuff. Now, when we talk about Nick Chubb, I want to say off the top, because I know when you talk about Nick Chubb, you're going to need to get ready for the angry mob. And this is what it comes down to with Nick Chubb. Let me say at the top, he's extremely, extremely talented from a real-life perspective. When it comes to real-life running backs, I think it's probably Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor as your top 3. Maybe you could put McCaffrey in there. And when we look at last year's stats, he dominates in all of these rushing stats. He's top 5 in rushing yards over expectation per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, missed tackles forced, breakaway run percentage, elusiveness rating. He is a great real-life running back. There is no stat out there when it comes to between the tackles where Nick Chubb looks like a bad running back. He is extremely, extremely good. And I want to make sure to give him his flowers here because I'm not sitting here and telling you guys that Nick Chubb is not a good running back. I'm saying that at his price in fantasy football, he's not a great investment at that 2-3 turn price. I prefer the 3-4 turn area for Nick Chubb. And you guys know my philosophy at running back. I shoot for upside. Chubb feels like if you asked stock fantasy analyst number 1, who's a really safe running back in fantasy, they would say Nick Chubb. Here's the issue. Running backs bust at a really high rate. You're looking at 40% to 60% bust rate in the first 2 rounds of fantasy drafts. And when we look at Nick Chubb, he hasn't been this really safe running back. The last 2 years, he's returned under an 8.3% win rate, which again, 1 divided by 12 is 8.3%. So he's been a net loss the last 2 seasons that you've rostered him. And in those 2 seasons, he's missed 3 to 4 games. So he hasn't stayed healthy. He hasn't paid off for you. He hasn't profited in fantasy. He's not the reason why you're winning championships with Nick Chubb. And he's not someone that commands a lot of volume. Now, I'm not the head coach at the Browns. If I was the coach of the Browns, I would want 70% plus of the opportunities to go to Nick Chubb, but that's just not how it has panned out at this point in his career. Last year, he was at 51.7% snap share and a 58.3% opportunity share, both numbers that barely even crack the top 20 at running back. And the reason for this low usage, 2 reasons. 1 is that he's not a strong pass catcher, and 2, it's that he shares a backfield with 2 really talented running backs, one of them really talented in the passing game. And when we look at Nick Chubb, the receiver, his highest target share came in 2019. So that was 3 years ago. That was his second year in the NFL. He had a 9.6% target share, which was outside of the top 24 running backs this year. Then we look at last season, only a 6.3% target share, 56th among running backs, behind guys who aren't even known as pass catchers, A.J. Dillon and Alexander Madison. He is a net negative in the passing game. He is not going to give you any difference-making production there, which is a big problem in PPR leagues where we know targets and pass catches, or just catches in general, are worth more than carries. So if you're not getting receiving work, you need to have bell cow type opportunity, and he's not getting that. Now, when we look at his ceiling from a PPR standpoint, it's been an issue. We now have 4 years of Nick Chubb, and we only have 1 year breaking that 15-point per game threshold. And as we know, we're going to get into this later, but 15-point per game running backs aren't winning you leagues. Those are extremely replaceable production type players that you can get off of waivers. And with Nick Chubb, we're looking at his ceiling as 17.3 points per game, and he's only done that one time, and it was 2 years ago. Maybe you can bet on him to do that again, but again, 2-3 turn, 17.3 points per game as his absolute ceiling isn't going to do you a ton of good, especially when his median outcome is 15 points per game. I don't know why you would pay so much for that kind of production. And when we look at the other side of things, right, again, if he's not catching passes, it would be completely fine because he is Jonathan Taylor, where if they gave him enough carries and enough opportunity, he would be fine. But he's splitting the backfield with guys like Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson. And we look at the last 2 years, he's had 7 games without Kareem Hunt, and he's had 19 games with Kareem Hunt. And the issue is there's no difference. He averages around 16 points per game when Kareem Hunt's gone. His targets go from, 1.68 to 1.86. Nothing crazy. Receiving yards, I guess 4 more receiving yards you're looking at. Rush attempts stay literally the exact same at 16. His rushing touchdowns, I guess they take a hit. There's really not a ton of difference there. He's using that same Nick Chubb role. And it sucks to see, again, I really think that he should have a bigger role, but you shouldn't be mad at me for fading Nick Chubb. You should be mad at Kevin Stefanski for not using him to his full capacity. And originally I was like, okay, Kareem Hunt's there, and when he gets traded, it's wheels up for Nick Chubb. The issue is that this chart shows that when Kareem Hunt's not there, right, Kareem Hunt, he's someone that could get cut at this point. He could get traded. He could just stay with the team. And in the event that Kareem Hunt goes away, that doesn't necessarily mean that Nick Chubb is going to step into this massive role. And then on top of that, let's say they do get rid of Kareem Hunt. Dearness Johnson is a damn good running back behind him. He was first in the NFL in PFF's rushing grade. He was second in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. He's extremely, extremely good between the tackles. And in games where he was given the starting role, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 games, he averaged as well in that 16-point per game area. He's really efficient. He caught passes in college. Dearness Johnson isn't just some scrub random running back at this point. He is a Gus Edwards. He is a Damian Harris type, a really good between the tackles runner situationally. So Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson, one of them look like they're going to be on the move, whether that's Dearness Johnson or Kareem Hunt. We don't know at this point, but regardless of who it is, I don't think either really benefits Nick Chubb a whole ton. And that's really the issue. So we have a guy that we're paying a really fat premium on. We are paying early third, late second type prices pretty much on name value at this point with Nick Chubb, who's just going to give you a replaceable 15 points per game unless he sees massive efficiency, right? He could have like 20 touchdowns, but the problem is that now we have Deshaun Watson up in the air where it's like, oh, okay, he's just going to be suspended for 6 games, but NFL is appealing, and at this point it's looking like it could be the full season. There's also scenarios where he plays like the first 4 games and then gets suspended the rest of the season. So much is up in the air with that offense. You might as well just assume that it's going to be Jacoby Brissett for like 80% of the games, and at that point, you're not going to see spike efficiency with Nick Chubb in an offense run by Jacoby Brissett. So when you're looking at Nick Chubb, you're looking at replaceable production. This is a great tweet by Jacob Sanderson. I reference it all the time. A friend of the channel. Nick Chubb, 15.2 points per game. You can replace that production off waivers with guys like Devonta Booker, 15.8 points per game, Darrell Williams, Deonta Foreman, Cordell Patterson, Elijah Mitchell. There's going to be guys you can go out there and start. And not even listed here, you have guys like Rashaad Penny and Justin Jackson and Rex Burkhead. There's plenty of guys almost every week. You also had the guys on the Ravens that were startable for different stretches. We had like Devonta Freeman and Latavius Murray. You also had weeks where, I'm trying to think the guy on the Raiders, but Peyton Barber was even startable. Okay, running back goes down. He's not going to play this week. We can now start some guy who can match a Nick Chubb's production. And on top of that, you're paying for Nick Chubb a 15-point per game running back at the 2-3 turn. So it's like, it's not even it's what I would call Nick Chubb, in my eyes, he's the first dead zone running back going off the board, because I don't understand paying the premium for Nick Chubb at that spot when you can just get your 15 points per game. If you want to pay up for 15 points per game, which I don't recommend, by the way, if you want to do that, why not just take Josh Jacobs in like the 6th round or David Montgomery in that area? Like, why pay up for Nick Chubb and take on the opportunity cost of taking Nick Chubb over guys like A.J. Brown and T. Higgins and Mark Andrews and Mike Evans and Tyreek Hill and Javonte Williams? And even I would even take Leonard Fournette over Nick Chubb, and I'm not even a Leonard Fournette guy. So that's how I feel about Nick Chubb. I'm not drafting him anywhere. He doesn't really have a path to crazy upside. Now, again, I think Nick Chubb is an insanely talented running back. If he traded places with like Dalvin Cook on the Vikings, I think he would be like a top 5 pick. If he traded places with, let's say, like Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon get traded to the Browns for Nick Chubb, right? And like Nick Chubb in like a first or something. I don't know. These are random trades that I'm thinking in my mind. I'm just saying if you put him in a better environment where you could guarantee that he would have like a 70% of the workload, he would be a top 5 running back in fantasy, and I wouldn't even dispute it. He's that efficient. He is really good in FPOE over expected per game. It just doesn't really materialize for Nick Chubb. Now, the next running back we're going to talk about is Elijah Mitchell. He's going off the board on Underdog at the 606 as the RB22. In my rankings, I have him as my 709 as the RB25. And Elijah Mitchell feels like we're paying for last year's production, and that's always a bad bet to make, where it just can't be good to pay a premium for last year's top waiver wire ad, right? We saw last year with James Robinson. I know James Robinson got hurt, and he was like okay for stretches, but it's usually not a great bet. Now, I think James Robinson was actually a bad example because he was fine, but you were also like paying like 4th round prices for him once ETN went down. But we're talking about a day 3 running back that you now have to take in the 6th round of drafts. And again, this is the RB dead zone where we want to be prioritizing those difference-making wide receivers. And when we look at this range, also let me know how you guys feel when I do this. I don't know if you guys like this, but I want to start pulling up the players going in a similar range. Just be like, these are the guys that I prefer in that area. But when we look at Elijah Mitchell, in this 6th round area, I prefer Michael Thomas, Elijah Moore, Adam Thielen, Devonta Smith, DeAndre Hopkins, Drake London, even Kadarius Toney at wide receiver. I think they're all way better upside swings. And then even at running back, I prefer Jacobs, who I think his role is a little more secure. I'm not really buying into I know last night on the Hall of Fame game, he like took 2 series straight, and it's like, why weren't they sitting him if he's like a starter? I think they were just giving him 2 series, and then he probably is going to be eased back as the preseason goes on, but we'll see. And then A.J. Dillon is a guy where he has so much contingent upside, and that's one of the issues with Elijah Mitchell. When we talk about contingent upside, and this is something that we really want to be keying in on with running backs, where there's so much chaos in an NFL season. Running backs are getting hurt, teams are outperforming or underperforming their expectations, and in the chaos of the season, the one thing that wins out is going to be talent. For a 17-game season, it would be very rare for every running back and every backfield to stay stable in how it looks at this moment in time. So you want running backs that in the chaos of the season benefit from the chaos. And if Aaron Jones was to go down today with a season-ending injury, I hate to even put that out there, but if that was to happen, A.J. Dillon would be probably drafted right next to Javonte Williams in the 2nd round. But Elijah Mitchell, there is no running back that can get hurt in this backfield. Okay, Jeff Wilson gets hurt tomorrow. Trey Sermon gets hurt tomorrow. TDP gets hurt tomorrow. Nothing changes. He is what he is, a 15-point per game replaceable running back, which is where he was at last year. He was at 15 points per game. And now I know some of you guys might be like, okay, he was at 15 points per game last year, but he was a rookie, so shouldn't he improve? And here's the issue with Elijah Mitchell is he probably maxed out at 15 points per game last year. He was a guy that doesn't have a lot of room to improve. He was 3rd in the NFL in opportunity share, which is crazy after looking at what we just did with Nick Chubb. Elijah Mitchell had more percentage of the carries on the 49ers and the targets than Nick Chubb did on the Browns, which is insane to say out loud. So third in the NFL in opportunity share. So he's getting a lot of volume. 18.8 carries per game. Almost a 20 carry per game guy last year as a rookie. And he was efficient. He was top 12 in the NFL in FPOE per game, which is fantasy points over expectation per game. How much are you outperforming your volume on a per game basis? And he was top 12 in that. So he was already efficient, and he was already getting workhorse type touches. Now, the only spot that he could improve in is his receiving work, but I doubt that that happens. First of all, we don't really see the 49ers use receiving backs at a high rate. And second of all, Elijah Mitchell was at a 7% target share last year. He was outside of the top 30 running backs, and he wasn't a big pass catcher in college. He was, coincidentally, 6.8% college target share guy. So he was at 7% in the NFL, 6.8% in college, which was in the 49th percentile for college running back. So he's not a pass-catching running back by trade. And now on top of that, he goes from Jimmy Garoppolo, who just checks it down all game, to Trey Lance, who's going to want to scramble himself or air it out and push it downfield. So there really isn't much room for him to get any more receiving work. There's really not any more room for him to see more volume than 18.8 carries per game. He was already efficient last year. I think that carry number even comes down with Trey Lance taking a lot of the carries. So it's pretty tough here, where we have this issue that he is someone that performed last year, is now getting overdrafted because of it, and he's a day 3 pick as well. So coaches don't really show allegiance to these types of running backs. We saw Phillip Lindsay just get kicked to the curb. We saw same thing with Jordan Howard, same thing with Alfred Morris. The magic eventually runs out, especially with Kyle Shanahan, where when we look at Kyle Shanahan in the backfields that he's had, not that one, he shows no allegiance. He doesn't care about your draft capital. He doesn't care if you were good for him last year. He cares about what are you doing in this present moment and are you available. And this is a great tweet from Matthew Friedman, where he just breaks down the lead backs in the last 5 seasons with the 49ers: Carlos Hyde, Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Elijah Mitchell. It's been a different guy every single year. Your best bet is to just take the cheapest guy. And Shanahan as well, somebody who drafted Trey Sermon early last year and then just deferred to Elijah Mitchell, he doesn't care. So the same guy who just turned his back on his 3rd-round pick could just turn his back on last year's bell cow and Elijah Mitchell if Jeff Wilson gets hot, if TDP gets hot, if Trey Sermon even gets hot, if Elijah Mitchell goes down. Remember, he missed 6 games last year. Shanahan's also a guy who doesn't care about your health. He ran Breida into the ground. He ran Raheem Mostert into the ground. Elijah Mitchell already missed 6 games last year. What if Elijah Mitchell comes out here, plays, let's say, 6 straight games, he's like a 15-point-per-game guy, he goes down, and then TDP, Jeff Wilson, Trey Sermon, one of those guys pops, and then Elijah Mitchell never gets that roll back. So there's a lot going on here where he's this really fragile near-term projection where I think that, you can pencil him in for 15 points per game in week 1. The issue with Elijah Mitchell comes down to is how confident are you that by like week 8, week 9, Elijah Mitchell is still giving you that type of production. To me, Elijah Mitchell seems a lot like almost like, I'm not going to say Mike Davis. I think he's better than Mike Davis and in a better situation, but he is getting pushed up just for projectable volume. I think I would be comfortable taking Elijah Mitchell in that area with guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Devin Singletary, guys who aren't great running backs but are in good situations. That's the area I'd want to draft him. He goes like 2 full rounds ahead of that. I cannot pay that price. That's why I have so much Ty Davis price. I think he's a great dart throw to have, just taking a stab at this backfield. Now, the next guy we're going to talk about, Rashaad Penny. He's going off the board right now as the 806, as the RB29. In my rankings, I have him as my 905 as the RB36. So like a round later than ADP. And here's the issue. I was actually in on Rashaad Penny early on in the offseason. I thought that he was a fine pick. He was going in this range of like 115 to 125, and now he's at pick 90. And this is a really cool tool by a guy over at RotoViz, Michael Dubner, where you can show your exposure and where you drafted players on Underdog. And I have 5.75%, we'll just say 5.8% exposure to Rashaad Penny. But the interesting part is that I got all my shares in early on in the offseason. My ADP, so my average draft position of where I was taking Penny was 121. And I was cool with that. Anywhere 115 plus, and then he's a fine, 10th round pick, 9th round pick. He's someone you can just add to the running back core. But now he's picked 90. And that's the issue. When we're taking 8th round shots on Rashaad Penny, that's the issue. Now, you also see ADP closing line value. I got like 31 picks of closing line value on Rashaad Penny at this point. So that's really interesting. And I get it. Rashaad Penny popped last year. And we'll do a little, we'll pump him up real quick. He looked good last year, man. He was playing out of his mind from weeks 14 on. From weeks 14 on, he was the RB2 in points per game at 22 points per game with only an expected points. So again, expected points is based on your volume, based on your red zone touches, all of that, how many fantasy points should you have scored? He outscored his expected points per game by 9.8 points per game. He was only expected to be a 12.3 point per game guy as the RB26 over that span. Instead, he was the RB2. He was projected for 415 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He ended up with 671 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. And here's the issue. All of that efficiency is good. It at least signals to you guys that, or us, it signals to us that he is talented. The issue is that he had Russell Wilson in all of these games, and I don't think any of those marks are even close to repeatable or even close to getting in that same area in this new environment. We're now looking at a spot where the Seahawks are going to suck. They're like a 5.5 win total team, bottom of the NFL. They have the 32nd offensive line ranking on PFF heading into 2022, and that's forfeiting a lot of efficiency because Russell Wilson adds a lot of efficiency to your offense. If you guys don't remember, I feel like Russell Wilson was actually a lot better in the back half of the season or like the back quarter with this Rashaad Penny sort of resurgence. And the issue is that now that we have a less efficient environment where we're not going to score as many points, the offensive line is going to suck, he doesn't have the pass catching to make up for it. Because, you know, in a world where that doesn't line up, at the very least, a guy like Alvin Kamara on a bad team or Christian McCaffrey on a bad Panthers team can go out of the backfield and just catch passes in negative game scripts. The problem is Penny doesn't do that. He played weeks 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 when he lit the world on fire. That's 5 games. He only caught 5 passes in those 5 games. That's a 16 pass or 16 catch or 17 catch pace on the entire season, which is rough. So he's not going to get the pass catching to overcome the negative game scripts and the inefficient run blocking. And then on top of that, we haven't even mentioned that the Seahawks went out there and they drafted a second-round pick, Kenneth Walker, who also has the exact same skill set. He's also really good between the tackles, but struggles as a wide receiver. He was an elite yards created guy. He is going to be really good between the tackles, possibly even better than Rashaad Penny between the tackles. And this is the issue, because with this second-round pick, right, Pete Carroll doesn't really care about draft capital, but Rashaad Penny only signed, I believe, 1 year. Like, it was like a 1-year extension for this year. What happens if the Seahawks go, like, let's say, like 0-11, or like 0-8, or 0-7, or like 1-6? By week 7, week 8, week 9, they might just start shifting the backfield towards Kenneth Walker just to see what they have in their second-round rookie draft pick for the future. And even if you don't want to look at it through that lens, we're talking about 2 running backs. Neither can catch passes, so we're splitting rushing work in an awful, inefficient environment. There's not going to be any efficiency from yards per carry or touchdowns. It's going to be really tough for that to pay off when you have 2 guys squeezing that rushing environment. And then on top of that, neither of them play in pass situations. Last year, we had Travis Homer and DJ Dallas as the long down and distance, third down type running backs. We're going to have that again. So this is a 3-headed committee where you have Homer or Dallas as the pass-catching guys, and you have Kenneth Walker and Rashaad Penny splitting the between the tackles work. That is really rough, where I usually like to target committees because you can kind of get some really nice upside where you can attack a committee like James Conner last year. He was a guy who was in like a committee, but he was in a good offense, a good environment, and he thrived. The issue is there's not really anything here. You would need, like, Kenneth Walker, Rashaad Penny would have to be so good that they can overcome that. Now, I'm not going to say fade Kenneth Walker because his price has come down at this point. They've actually swapped where Kenneth Walker, we can actually show it here. And I know it's Ken Walker now, but I still like almost refuse to call him that. This is kind of swapped. So this is an old screenshot where Kenneth Walker is now going around pick 115 and Rashaad Penny is going in that pick 90 range. And this is a great sort of, I don't even know what you want to call it, but a graphic by Jacob Sanderson. We mentioned him earlier. I talked with him in June about Rashaad Penny and Kenneth Walker, and he kind of has a really cool way of looking at late round running backs in terms of like hero RB and zero RB and all of that. And when he's looking for running backs in this area, right, once we're out of the dead zone, which I would say Clyde Edwards-Helaire is like the last guy who I wouldn't consider a dead zone running back, this is what we're looking for. He circled the running backs in blue. That could be a 3-down back without any injury in front of them. Pink is for guys who can catch passes, and yellow is my team good? Because if your team is good, then you can just benefit from touchdowns and efficiency. Blue, just having a ton of volume from being a 3-down back without injury. And then pink, do I catch passes so you can just overcome situation with PPR points. And every running back on this list checks that off. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who could be a 3rd-down back. He catches passes technically. He's on a good team. You have Miles Sanders, who could be a 3-down back without an injury. He's on a good team. And you can just go down the list from that. But Rashaad Penny in particular, he can't be a 3-down back without injury because we know he doesn't catch passes. That's going to be Travis Homer or DJ Dallas. He doesn't catch passes, and his team isn't good. So it's really tough to make that bet. I was cool with taking a swing on him, after like the Ramondre Stevenson range, like in the 120s, but now it just makes no sense. There's better options in this area. Take any of these running backs over Rashaad Penny. Again, Rashaad Penny is going to be right where Kenneth Walker is. So give me Pollard, literally give me all these guys. Give me Pollard, give me Miles Sanders, give me Clyde Edwards-Helaire, give me Damian Harris, maybe not Cordell Patterson, but give me Kareem Hunt, give me Devin Singletary, James Cook, Chase Edmonds, Ramondre Stevenson, all of those guys over Rashaad Penny. And that's pretty much what you're picking between is now you've sort of gotten your wide receivers. You're entering this area where maybe you're going to draft Rashaad Penny. Instead of taking Penny, I would really just advise taking Cook, Edmonds, Ramondre, any of those guys. Now, after that, we have one last guy, Ronald Jones, who, this is the one outlier. He is somebody that is my most owned running back at this point. I have him on underdog on 19.2% of my teams. He's now going at pick 135-ish as the RB44. And this is sort of the idea of like, you must stop drafting these guys as soon as possible, is Ronald Jones now has a little bit of a change of a situation, and we have to adjust. We can't just dig our heels in, have take lock, and I liked Ronald Jones in June, but that doesn't mean I have to like him in August. And this is kind of what the reports have been around Chiefs training camp, and it's been that Ronald Jones is on pretty much the chopping block in terms of who's going to get cut. And at this point, it's time to back off until the price comes down to where it should be. At least for me, as somebody that has a lot of exposure to Ronald Jones, I think we should sort of take a step back, wait for ADP to stabilize with this new news, and then maybe get our exposure to him. Because I was into Ronald Jones, right? This is pretty easy to see. He's on the Chiefs. They're going to score a ton of touchdowns. He has a really good skill set, like a Damian Harris, like a Gus Edwards, like a Dearness Johnson, where he can run between the tackles really well. And that's something the Chiefs needed, right? Last year, they played a lot of cover 2. We'll take away the deep stuff. We'll force you to run between the tackles. They couldn't do it. I thought Ronald Jones was the perfect answer for that. And then on top of that, tons of rushing upside or rushing touchdown upside. The issue is at this point is he's not a lock to be active on game days, which is a big problem. And he's not even a lock to make the team. Now, Hayden Winks here had a tweet, reasonable odds either Jerick McKinnon or Ronald Jones don't make the Chiefs roster. Now, I'll push back a little bit on the idea that he won't make the roster. I know that the reports are coming out like that. We have 5 running backs on this roster. Usually teams keep 3 to 4. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You have Jerick McKinnon, Ronald Jones, Derek Gore, Isaiah Pacheco. And Isaiah Pacheco kind of throws the wrench into everything. Because the issue is that I'm not going to say like Pacheco's like super talented, you have to draft him. Like I've seen some buzz about him. The issue is that he's taking special team snaps at this point. He is a kick returner, punt returner type guy, which means he's locked to make the team because he can play in special teams, unlike the other running backs. And then on top of that, he's going to be active on game days because they need him to return the kicks and return the punts. And this is where the issue comes in because now we have McKinnon, Ronald Jones, Derek Gore all on the chopping block. And we have 2 running backs locked in to be active on game days. Most teams, they will keep 3 to 4 running backs on their roster, only like 3 running backs on their active game day roster. 1 spot's already CEH, 1 spot is already Isaiah Pacheco. So we now have McKinnon versus Rojo. And if they feel good about Clyde Edwards-Helaire between the tackles, they love Clyde Edwards-Helaire. For some reason, it's also like Josh Jacobs where they won't really use him as a pass catcher a ton. So they might still prefer McKinnon as that long down and distance, 3rd down, 2-minute drill type of guy like a McKissick to Rojo, which means if on active game days, we're looking at McKinnon, Pacheco, Clyde, and then Rojo makes the team as that like 3rd or 4th running back, but he's actually a healthy scratch in those games, that is really tough for Rojo because he goes from a guy that has standalone RB3-ish value where there's going to be games where he could just get a touchdown or mix in the rushing. But now if we're talking about Rojo as a guy who's not going to be active on game days without an injury ahead of him, he becomes a pure handcuff. Or I don't know why I said cough, but a pure handcuff. And that's tough. That really moves his value down to probably like that, I would say like Khalil Herbert area where we're just drafting pure handcuffs. And then after that, there's also a chance that they cut Ronald Jones in favor of Derek Gore. Now, I think that's a long shot. I would be absolutely shocked if that happened, but Derek Gore has been with the team for longer than Ronald Jones, so maybe they side with that. Now, I will say, Ronald Jones isn't dead. he still has plenty of outs. He could make the team and be active on game days. He could get cut and go to the Saints or the Baltimore Ravens, and that would be a good spot. But at this point, I could stop drafting him with that 19.2% exposure and still end up about even. So I'm going to stop drafting him. If you want to be targeting him, he goes around pick 135, like I said, or no, 145, or 135. I think at this point, we should be holding off on Ronald Jones until we get some more definitive news in terms of who's going to be on the active game day roster and all of that. If you're going to draft Ronald Jones, wait for him to fall in your draft. There's a lot of fear around Ronald Jones right now. If he falls to the 150, 160, and you get into the 15th round area, that's when it's okay to draft Ronald Jones. But for now, I think he's somebody that we should sort of be pivoting into a fade until things sort of figure themselves out. Now, I'm going to be doing a massive rankings update tomorrow on Saturday. So I'm going to reflect all of this. I'm going to be moving Ronald Jones down. I'm going to be getting all of the tiers looking beautiful. I have my top 150 in PPR rankings live on there on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I'll be doing an update, like I said, tomorrow. So if you want access to that and you want to dominate your leagues, your drafts with my rankings, go on there, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll be in the description. It'll be down below in the comments. I will also say you can get access to my fab guidance. I do weekly fab guidance, waiver wire article. I also do rest of season rankings. So pretty much an all-in package with seasonal, dynasty, all that stuff is on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. That is going to do it for us today, fellas. If you enjoyed the video at any point in time, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
10-0, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Me.